Welcome back to the Traveling Man, everyone. Behind me is the Cincinnati Union Terminal, built in 1933. It was at one time one of the busiest train stations for passengers in the country. It's built in the Art Deco style period of the 1920s and 30s, and today it now serves as the Cincinnati Museum Center. It's been preserved, and we can go inside and see all the different exhibits that they have from time to time. They kind of change throughout the year. They also have an IMAX theater in here that shows special movies from time to time, but today we're here to go and check out the Holocaust Museum that they have in here. This is one of a few. There's one in Dallas, LA, Detroit, and DC, and then Cincinnati. So if you want to check out the Cincinnati Union Terminal, now known as the Cincinnati Museum Center, then all you have to do is follow me. Work on the Cincinnati Union Terminal would begin in August of 1929 and wouldn't be completed until March 31st of 1933. It would cost a whopping $41 million to build the terminal, including the purchase of the grounds and the readjustment of the railroad facilities. Because the Union Terminal would open during the 1930s at the height of the Great Depression, train travel had been on decline. This would mean that the station wouldn't see success at first. It wouldn't be until the 1940s when traffic at the train station would begin to increase due to World War II. But the height of the 1950s were looming right around the corner. It was the beginning of the end for the Union Terminal. Or so we thought it was. The 1950s and 60s would see an increase in air travel and automobile ownership as people sought to take these forms of transportation instead of the train. By the early to mid-1960s, and with ridership still on a decline, many proposals were made as to what to do with the space that wasn't really being utilized anymore. 8 proposals were made for the space, including a railroad museum, transportation center for Airbus and rail lines, court building, convention center, Air Force Museum, Museum of Science and Industry, private industry, and a shopping center. Wait, what? Yes, you did hear me right. I said a shopping center. I think that would have been a really cool use of this space to have a mall in here, but being the decline of malls in the current day, I'm kind of glad that it didn't turn into a mall because it would have just ended up failing anyway. By the early 1970s, Amtrak would become the only train operator to service the station, and in 1972, Amtrak would abandon the Union Terminal for a new station. That very same year, the Ohio Historical Society would swoop in and nominate the terminal for the National Register of Historic Places, with a note of urgency that this building was important and needed to be saved. You see, the Southern Railway had planned to demolish the terminal that very year. During the 1970s and 80s, Union Terminal would be turned into the Land of Oz, a shopping mall that was supposedly going to have an ice skating rink and a bowling alley, but it was downgraded to only having roughly around 50 shops. It would be successful throughout the 80s. The Oz shopping mall would close in 1984, but its anchor Loehmann's department store, which was in the center rotunda, would remain opening until the following year. Moving into the 90s, the current Cincinnati Museum Center would be planned, and the museum would open on November 10th of 1990, expanding and adding new exhibits over the years into what it is today. Alright, so what you can see right here, all of these windows, these were the ticket windows for the trains that all the arriving passengers would come up here and they could buy their tickets to different destinations around the country, back when we actually had fully functioning rail service, much like most of Europe does. Unfortunately, we don't really have much of a rail service anymore, although the Amtrak does still come into this station. Yeah, you can see right here, this is where you would go for the Amtrak train. And they've even got this really cool old sign that's really Art Deco that says 2 trains. And this would have been where you would have gone back to catch your train to go anywhere within the country. Alright, so these are the staircases that take you down to the Holocaust Museum. You can see they have all kinds of documentation of, I guess, from what I'm gathering, these are birth certificates and different people that were influential in World War II and the Holocaust, I'm assuming. There really isn't anything that kind of explains what all of these are for. At least I haven't seen anything yet, but it says the staircase was dedicated to Ellen and Joseph Schneider. Yeah, but you can see here just all down the side of the staircase, it has all these documents. This is the first thing you'll come across when you visit the Holocaust Museum. It's kind of like a timeline of survivors from the Holocaust and all of their various quotes. It was really kind of cool to see this. And after, reading through this, you'll enter through a set of doors and watch a short film. It was a really cool film with several Holocaust survivors talking about their journeys and getting to Cincinnati and all of that. If you want to see it, you'll have to visit the museum. But what you're looking at right now is the Wall of Tears. If you want to read any of the information that pops on the screen, you can just pause the video at any time. Now we'll be leaving the theater and heading into the Holocaust Gallery, which is the main gallery. Here you can see all kinds of artifacts and memorabilia from the Holocaust, or roughly around that time period, kind of showing off, the clothes they wore and all the different goods and stuff that they would have had in the Jewish communities. Here you'll learn about the origins of the Holocaust and the Jews and how it all began. So while you're visiting this area, take a minute to just kind of peruse through all the different objects and items. This museum didn't have a whole lot of artifacts. I've been to some of the other Holocaust museums, mainly the one that's in Detroit, and it has a whole lot more artifacts and stuff. This one was mostly just information to read, but it was still a really cool museum to go through. I liked looking at, this is some of the Jewish artifacts they had, and whatnot. These are 300-year-old Torah finials, more commonly known today as candle holders. They had a bunch of these displays where you would press a button and then all kinds of doors and stuff would pop open and different animated things would happen. It was really kind of cool. I liked it. Rather than just having a plain boring thing on the wall that had information, this was, a little more interactive, and it allowed them to display more information in a smaller space. This museum mainly focused on the Holocaust survivors that immigrated over to Cincinnati and Ohio, and how Cincinnati was kind of influential in the Holocaust rescue and all of that kind of stuff. Whereas some of the other museums I've been to just kind of dive deeper into the Holocaust and just, they're not as specific to a certain area. But also I noticed this museum didn't really drive home how awful the Holocaust was. I've been to some museums where you'll see some things that are just like, I wouldn't really want to show them here on YouTube because I'd probably get the video taken down. Disfigured bodies and like the one in Detroit has real footage of, the atrocities that were going on in the concentration camps, and you get to go inside a boxcar so that you can get kind of the sense of what it was like being crammed on all the trains and, shipped around to the different concentration camps. The museum does take you on a chronological order of, how the events would play out, where you would go from being, free to then kind of being rounded up and shipped off on rail cars to the ghetto, to then going into the concentration camps, to all the, like right here you're looking at how a lot of the Jews resisted, being captured and hid out and did all of that kind of stuff. And, then it goes into them being freed and liberated, and it talks about the Nuremberg trials and all of that. It was a really nice museum, but I would like to see more artifacts being incorporated. This was cool to get to see. This is an actual uniform that they would have worn at the concentration camps. In fact, this is the very uniform that Leo Willich would have worn when he was at his camp. Now we've made it to the liberation. The Jews that are still alive are finally free. And it's time to persecute all of the Germans and the Nazis, for their actions in persecuting and killing the 6 million or so Jews. And you can see here, these are the Nuremberg trials, actual footage of the court hearings and all of that. It was cool to see, and I like how they have it on the old school 1940s, 50s TV. That's pretty cool. So the rest of the museum isn't really about the Holocaust per se. I mean, it is, but it's kind of more about everything going forward from the Holocaust. And it talks a lot about what are you going to do to make humanity better, and all of that kind of stuff. And some of the issues that are going on in today, like Martin Luther King and what he did, it goes into genocides and all the different racial problems that we're having in today's world. It even goes into environmental problems that we're having and talks about that, because that kind of impacts people in a way. So I kind of liked this display that they had here. It's really the only images that you'll see of some of the concentration camp people. And I think that's from, it's not anyone from the Jewish concentration camps or the German ones, but it gives you an idea of what they would have looked like, some of the Jews, after being in the concentration camp. They have this interactive wall and several cameras where you can stand in front and have your picture taken. And you can get put up on the wall, and it's basically like you're taking a stand to say that you're going to make the world better and be more kind to everybody in the future and that kind of a thing. It was really kind of cool to see all the little pictures in here and to try and find yourself amongst the thousands of other people. Although, of course, I look stupid wearing a mask, but, it is what it is. Everyone's kind of wearing a mask in these. And this was the final hallway. This concludes the tour of the Holocaust Museum here at the Cincinnati Museum Center. So let's exit the museum and go check out the gift shop that they have here. So this is the main gift shop, and of course, like all museum gift shops, everything is astronomically overpriced. But they did have a good assortment of different things to buy from here. They, of course, had the space stuff like most museums gift shops have, and, all the little kids' toys and the science kits and whatnot. Well, our time here at Cincinnati's Union Terminal, or the Cincinnati Museum Center, is coming to an end. I want to thank you for, taking the time to come along with me as we took a look at this amazing Art Deco train station, as well as paid tribute to those who suffered during the Holocaust, and to those who unfortunately didn't make it out alive. If you like the work that I'm doing here and you want to support it, then check out the links on the screen, especially the Patreon one. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on another episode of The Traveling Man.